Good evening and welcome to the University of York, and thank you all so much for abandoning the sunshine, because with Britain and it might not, Yorkshire, it might not last. So thank you all very much for coming along. I'm Chandra, I'm Director of External Relations here at the University. I'm also the Director of the York Festival of Ideas. And it's my enormous pleasure and privilege to welcome you all here tonight. There are festival brochures outside. We kick off with about 200 free events on the 2nd of June, including some events that we hope that you'll like. So, let me first of all say I'm so delighted to not only welcome you in person, but also our online audience. We have people zooming in from all around the world, including, we hope, many students who will be coming here in September, October of this year. So to all of you, a huge welcome as well. So before I move on to introductions though, I have a very boring housekeeping thing, which is to point your attention to the health and safety slide. We are not expecting any fire alarms or any other disruptions. If there is anything, then the stewards will direct you to the nearest exit. Okay, so your chair for tonight is my wonderful colleague, Professor of Global Literature, Claire Chambers, the most productive woman I know in lockdown, who decided that not only was she the major expert on an absolutely huge lover of contemporary South Asian literature, but she was also going to learn Hindi and Urdu just past time during lockdown. And I really take my hat off to anyone who can kind of transcend and do that amazing work, all whilst teaching online and researching as well. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, but first of all, to situate us in the world of Amish Tripathi, who Claire is going to properly introduce, I'm going to play a short video, just so you can get a flavour of the amazing books and how successful they've been, and then Claire will take it from there. So thank you again, and welcome to everyone.
As usual, एक और super hit book. Always, I think what happens with an Amish book is that you read it and suddenly you get very desperate. Ki, where is the next one?
Not only is it descriptive, it's imaginative, but it's just sheer brilliance.
I wish that there are many more amongst you that will be inspired by today and this evening, and indeed by Amish Tripathi.
He takes on mythology by the core and really, represents us and presents us in a way that we haven't seen before.
The celebrity author, but one of the most influential voices of our times.
It's that kind of a book that could interest my daughter and me at the same time.
Arguably the best-selling Indian author of all time.
You know, I've been going through your new book, Ravan. This is possibly, to my mind, the most fascinating of the books that you've written so far. Thank you.
What we are seeing today, a publishing phenomenon, nothing less.
No, Amish is India's first literary pop star. the writer of the fastest and the second fastest selling book series in Indian publishing history. Readers of all genders, communities and backgrounds, from young to old, have loved his books. Critics have said that his books are backed by tremendous research, deep thought, a rooted pride in India, and a liberal progressive outlook. It's no wonder that his fan following has reached heights unheard of before for an Indian author. 10 best-selling books, 6 million copies sold, and the journey continues. Adding to his already full cap of feathers, Amish became a diplomat in 2019, taking Indian culture to foreign lands as the director of the Nehru Centre in London. He is also Minister Culture at the Indian High Commission to the UK. And now, in a tryst with the camera, Amish has recently made his debut as a TV documentary host in the highly acclaimed Legends of the Ramayana on Discovery TV. There are many more documentaries to follow. Amish, an author, diplomat, TV documentary host, movie producer, and most importantly, a proud Indian.
Everybody. I'm Claire Chambers from the Department of English and Related Literature at York. As in a very generous introduction, Joan mentioned my research, which is to do with South Asia and also about the diaspora in Britain. And I'm very interested in India, Pakistan, and I'm going to Bangladesh this July. And I'm very pleased to be here this evening to have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Amish Tripathi. And Amish, York may act as well.
Very well. That, for those who don't know Hindi, was perfectly.
With a bad accent. Amish is a diplomat and author. In his diplomatic role, Amish works as the Minister for Culture and Education at the Indian High Commission to the UK and the Director of the Nehru Centre in London. But alongside this, as you know, he's the author of 10 books and has sold 6.5 million copies. His books have been translated into 20 Indian and international languages. His Chandra series is the second fastest selling book series in Indian publishing history, and these books have introduced a new generation in India to their mythology and also brought that mythology to a global audience. So he's here tonight to talk about his journey from banker to author, his interest in mythology, the things that have inspired him to write, and the challenges he's faced. And there will be an opportunity to buy his book, his new book, which is the one that I've read and want to especially focus on today, and a selection of his other books from our independent bookseller, Fox Lane Books, after the talk. So please join Amish and us for that book signing afterwards. Oh, and I also have to just mention a rather silly thing, which is because of the massive heat wave of 20 degrees in Britain, I came out just with my prescription sunglasses. So I can see fine here, but I might struggle to see further back. So for the questions, I might look a bit foolish or cool, depending on your perspective.
Diva.
So I just wanted, let's start with where I left off, really, in the way that the Festival of Ideas has framed this event, their title.
Is that me?
It's
okay. Oh, sorry.
Please discuss your journey from banker to author of the fastest selling book series in Indian publishing history.
I'll keep it this.
Okay. Yes, I understand your creation story was that you self-published first. How do you cope with rejection? And do you have advice to aspiring authors about dealing with negative feedback and that?
Yeah, the first advice I'd have for authors is when you're promoting, be careful on the mic. Yeah, you're right. The first book that I wrote, Immortals of Menuha, this is all the way back in 2000. It was published in 2010, but it was rejected by every publisher it was sent to. I stopped counting at 20 rejections, and finally I self-published that book. And I got some. I've spoken of this publicly very often. I don't like it, so I got some pretty detailed feedback from a few of the publishers who told me why my book, that book, Immortals of Meluha, was a guaranteed flop. And there were various reasons that they, that they gave me for that. And I think so the first piece of advice I give to authors is that if others don't back you, the hell with it, you back yourself. And that's what I did. I actually just self-published my first book. It took off in the first week itself. And actually entered the bestseller charts in the first week, much to my surprise as well. And after 3-4 months, many of the publishers who rejected it came back to bid for it. And any authors out here, any published writers? Anyone? Yeah? Okay, so you know what your first contract is like, right?
Yeah.
Normally for most authors and those watching online, you know this, not just authors, for most creative people, their first contract is it's almost written by Shylock, right? It is designed to ensure that you actually earn almost nothing. So most artists start making money from their second piece of work. Luckily for me, since I negotiated my first book after it had already become a hit with my bestseller and many publishers had come to bid for it, I started making money from my first book itself. So actually it was a blessing in disguise. But I wouldn't have experienced all this if I hadn't said the hell with it. No one else is backing me, I back myself. What's the worst that could have happened? The book would have flopped. Alright. But among the things you really learn through life when you're kind of 75, 80 and reevaluating the things that you did, it's not the things that you tried and failed that will cause you regret. It's the things that you didn't even try. Winning and losing is part of the game. You should at least play the game. So that's really a strong piece of advice I give, not just to writers, but in any area of life. Just take the shot, try. If you fail, you fail. It's okay. Get up, dust yourself off, start walking again. But at least try. That's the most important thing.
Let's just linger on the banker aspect for a moment as well before we get into for Lanka. Because in an interview I saw you say that was an important side of things that you think to keep a job going, and that allowed you also to not have to necessarily compromise with some of the advice that publishers were giving, like somebody had said to you that you should take out all the yarn, the knowledge.
Yeah. So there was one publisher who was willing to publish my first book, just one. But what he told me was that my book is relatively long, 400 pages, but he said it's a very fast read, so the story is good. But he said that I kept insisting on getting into these philosophy sessions every second, third chapter, and I wanted to talk of philosophies. And he told me, and it was surprising for a publisher to speak this way of his own readers. He said, look, the youth aren't interested in higher IQ philosophy. You have to kind of remove this and dump it down. I thought it was a very bizarre thing to say, but okay, but that was his view. And he said that if you remove all these, he actually called them Gyan sessions. For those who don't know the Hindi word Gyan means knowledge. But he said Gyan sessions almost in a derogatory way. And he said if you remove this, I may be willing to publish it. And that's a point I made in that interview, that for all you know, if I was depending on my books for income, I may have compromised, right? Money makes you do things you don't want to do. And that was the benefit of having a job at that point of time. I resigned only after my second book. My job at that time was in life insurance. There's this guy called Woody Allen, I'm sure someone must have heard this joke, that he said there are things worse than death. Have you ever spent an evening with a life insurance guy? That was the job I was in. And it doesn't get more boring than that. And I was in charge of marketing, service quality and product management. For those who know life insurance, product development, it generally is the most mind-numbing job. Right? But because of that, it pays you very well. And because I was earning well enough from my job, I didn't have to compromise on my book. So the way I see it, there's no dishonor in having a job. It helped me keep my writing going. So this is a suggestion I give to all, not not just writers, all artists, have a job on the side. Unless you have bank of mommy and daddy, which most of us do, have a job on the side. It helps you keep your art pure. Money will force you to do things you don't want to do. And your art should be the voice of your soul. It should be your purpose. Its main purpose should not be making money. If money comes as an accident, great. If it doesn't come, no problem. The entire point of your art should be the voice of your soul.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to push back and keep the young sessions, because I thought the philosophical elements of Lanka were some of the most exciting bits for me. And I was hearing
and the funny thing, these publishers say that the youth aren't interested. At Litfest, the most thought-provoking questions on philosophy that I get are actually from the youth. Right? So this assumption that the youth aren't interested in philosophical or haiku stuff is not true. Yes, they can be interested in Instagram feed as well. But you can like two things, So one can like a completely brainless, comedy movie, for example, or for those who watch Hindi movies, Salman Khan movies, for example. Salman Khan can be accused of being many things, but high IQ is not one of them. Right? But his movies are great fun, and I enjoy Salman Khan movies. Right? Just put your brains aside, go with the flow, and you essentially go in there to see Bhai. That's a term for Salman Khan, Bhai. Bhai means brother, but but at the same time, I could enjoy a movie like Inception as well, or a book like The Adventure of English, which I was just discussing, which are actually tomes, and a person can do two things in his life, one is or her life. So this assumption that just because the youth like Instagram, an Instagram reel or this thing, that the assumption that they don't like IQ stuff is not really true. You can actually do both. It depends on the mood you're in.
And when I was reading those sort of philosophical debates in Lanka about statecraft and greatness versus happiness and war and things like that, I was hearing echoes of, Kautilya's Arthashastra, really quite...
I thought you were impressive. You read the Arthashastra?
Not all, I have to confess, but I have read a bit of it. And that pragmatism that predates Machiavelli, all about, it seemed, was that an influence when you were
Yeah, of course it was. So, for those who don't know, Kautilya is another name for Chanakya.
Yes.
Chanakya was the guru who helped found the modern empire, which was the greatest empire India ever had. It controlled practically all of the Indian subcontinent. So not just practically all of modern India, but also modern Bangladesh, Nepal, modern Pakistan, most of modern Afghanistan, parts of modern Iran, going into modern Tibet. A massive empire. And this was around 2,500 years ago. And it was exceptionally well run. And at that time, India was by far the wealthiest land on earth. There's this British economic historian called Angus Madison. How many of you guys have heard of Angus Madison? Economics graduates among you? Yeah? Oh, impressive. Applause for you. Okay. Yeah, applause for it. So Angus Madison is a British guy, a British economic historian who's studied GDP across 2,000 years. For all of the first millennium, India was 35% of the world's GDP, which is by far. The modern empire kind of led to this. And it's very interesting to read Arthashastra, which is Kautilya's text, because you get a sense of the philosophy that drove that time. How children should be brought up, how a king is supposed to be, women's rights, men's rights, attitude to LGBT, very interesting. The concept of a minimalistic state, that's actually a Kautilyan concept. That a state should just do a few things, do them exceptionally well, leave the rest to society, let them figure it out. How children should be brought up, for example. One of the things where Chanakya or Kautilya actually impacted my personal life was my mother had read Arthashastra when she was young. And there are 4 of us siblings, my eldest sister Bhavna is here. And there are 4 of us, she's the eldest, and then my little brother Amish, and then my twin Ashish and I have twin brothers. And she brought the 4 of us up according to what Chanakya had said. So Chanakya had this theory that when a child is younger than 5, you should drown him or her with love. Drown them with love and be around all the time. Right? So that the child has no complexes, no insecurities, because there's someone around all the time. Then from age 5 to age 15, be like a drill sergeant, discipline the hell out of them. Because they should be tough enough to handle anything. My mother was like that. And our father used to spoil us. My mother was strict, scary. And then at age 15, exactly like Chanakya had said, she suddenly just became a friend. Right? And the theory was that by this time your character is made, nothing can be done. But if a parent is a friend, at least the children confide in them, so you can advise them and stop them from doing something silly, for example. So she actually brought us up this way. So Kautilya actually impacted our personal lives 2,500 years later.
That's really interesting. And you're managing to get young people interested in the philosophy, but also obviously there's the mythic element, this sort of fictionalizing of myth, or Itihasa that we were talking about. Amish, you had a whole session on myth at the jail after lockdown, and you pushed back a little bit against this term, so that sort of sense that history and myth are not so easily separable. But I think it's the way that you portray the gods as human was something that really spoke to people. So in the context of the series, what does the phrase the Vishnu rise mean? And would you say a bit more about myth or Itihasa?
Okay. So on the Vishnu, you guys should read the book, hopefully. How many have read the book? Okay, that's a good number. Those who haven't, shame on you guys. The books are available now in the UK as well, so you can check them out. I explore the concept of Vishnu and Mahadev from the perspective of great leaders who we perceive as gods. Vishnu is a propagator of good, a builder of a new way of life, and a Mahadev is a destroyer of evil. There are two different needs, we need two different types of leaders for that. And why are they seen as gods? Because actually the Indian way, it's believed that the divine exists within all of us. And those who we worship as gods are those who discover the divine within themselves. So the only difference between them and us is we are yet to discover the divine within us. You know this, right? What does this translate as? What's the word for this? Namaste?
Oh,
yeah? Everyone knows this? Namaste? Yeah? What does Namaste translate as? Anyone wants to take it? Hello is the apparent translation on the surface. If you actually go to the Sanskrit root of Namaste,
is it I bow down to the divine?
I bow down to the divine. Who? Yeah. You and? Yeah. Both of you, applause for you. So, the technically correct Sanskrit translation of it is I bow to the divine within you. So actually every time we said hello, we were trying to, our ancestors said that they were trying to actually remind you of that concept, that I bow down to the divine within you. But the way I see it, this of course it teaches humility, because I'm bowing to the divine within you. I recognize that there is a divine within you, right? But it's also a challenge, right? That it's your job to discover the divine within you. And this is one of the things that I find very inspiring. So those who we see as leaders are those who discover a bit more of the divine within them, and that's our journey. In terms of history and myth, the word Itihasa that you spoke of, what's the translation of Itihasa? History, right? Yeah, you can guess by now. I'm trying to go to the Sanskrit root. What is? I guess you are right. On the surface, it translates as history, Itihasa.
As it happened.
Wow, you're aggressive. Yeah, so Itihasa literally translates as thus it happened. And this actually does not get into these are the set of facts and these are the interpretations of it. So actually, it doesn't get into the debate between mythology and history. Because one of the things our ancestors used to say is that who can be sure what truth is? The only thing you can be sure of is this moment. And the same set of facts can lead to radically different truths as well. Sitting in the UK, maybe I could use an example of, say, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who very rightly for the British is seen as a hero, very rightly, right? Same set of facts for the Indians, not so much, right? Okay. No, but the way, if we are comfortable with multiple truths, I can have my point of view that, I don't see Winston Churchill as a hero because many Indians died, because of his policies, millions. But at the same time, I can still respect the right of a British person to see him as a hero because actually he was very good for the UK, right? If he hadn't been there, you would have been rolled over.
So the Brits voted him out immediately once the war was over.
Fair, but he had a role to play, and I respect that. I know there are many British who have this view, but the point is if you can respect multiple truths, then you can respect different points of view. The same set of facts, right? And that's what Itihasa kind of allows. It doesn't get into this debate of mythology and history. If you see it from that perspective, then history is a bit like an immature child saying, my truth is your truth, right? Whereas mythology is saying, this is my truth, you can have your truth as well. Facts are the same. But the truth drawn out of those facts are obviously defined by our point of view, where we come from. As an Indian, I see the world in a particular way. A British person would obviously see the world in a different way. A French person would obviously see the world in a different way. And in this, how do you decide what history is? Right? So, Western history, and including history which is taught in India, that Columbus discovered America. That would have been news to the Native Americans because they thought they were already there. But this is a Western concept of history, right? So again, then where does truth lie? Depends on our thing. So that's my answer to that. Have that respect for multiple truths, though the facts can be the same.
And that openness to interpretation, and also your references to Sanskrit bring me on to a question about language, because the way you sort of are boldly dealing with myth is also carried through to your use of the English language, which I found really interesting. So, you've got that problem always in any kind of writing from the subcontinent, that conveying in English when characters wouldn't have been using English. And you play with that, it seems to me. You talk about patriarchy, a woman talks about patriarchy, no way, yes way, a man and bro and adulting.
Yeah.
So very, very contemporary use of English.
Yeah.
What language would your characters have been speaking? Sanskrit?
Yeah, so look, if one has to be technically correct, they would have been speaking Vedic Sanskrit, right? Which, as I'm sure those who follow languages know, is different from classical Sanskrit. Classical Sanskrit is what we know today. Very few people know Vedic Sanskrit well these days. One of whom was actually my grandfather. So he actually knew Vedic Sanskrit. So any language that you use outside of Vedic Sanskrit, including classical Sanskrit, is actually incongruous, right? It's technically not correct. So they're saying that if you are writing a historical fiction book, you have to use classical English. To me, seems like a force fit, because at the time when the characters were there, 5,000 years ago, English didn't even exist as a language, right? So any version of it is actually incongruous. So why not use a modern, easy version and make it easier to understand? And I use this for terms as well. So there's this author called Go Vidal. I'm sure when you would have, who's read Go Vidal? Yeah. Oh, much fewer than there should be. Okay. So Go Vidal, in my mind, one of the most brilliant writers of the 20th century, American writer. One of my favorite books is Julian. I don't know. Those who read Go Vidal, have you guys read Julian? Julian the Apostate? Yeah, so the Roman emperor. Go Vidal, if I don't recall the exact words, but he said in an interview that my job as an author is not to show off my research. My job is to make it easy for the reader. So for example, in Julian, he doesn't use the term Mediolanum for Milan. He says Milan. He doesn't use Londonium. London, right? Because it's just make it easy for the readers. So that's what I do. Is not just in terms of language, even in the terms that I use. I don't use Shutudri, I say Satvich. I use India, so that it just becomes, so that the reading becomes a little easier. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but at least this is what I follow, and
it didn't seem.
Luckily, it works.
It does work.
At least it works for some readers.
It seems like you were having fun with it as well. That you and doing a few deliberate anachronisms, bringing in philosophers that they couldn't have possibly known about, and messing with the timeline.
I have a bizarre sense of humor. Some of those things get edited out by the editors, and at times I kind of surrender on that. So I remember in the first, in the Shiva trilogy, there was a joke I put which unfortunately got edited out. I should bring that back in some future edition. Who is from India? Are you guys all British? Some of you of Indian origin? Yeah. British Indians or okay. So you know the term bhaiya, right? Yeah. So in India, for people from UP, Uttar Pradesh, where Varanasi is, colloquial and not very respectful term that's used is bhaiya. It's not really respectful at all. My family is from UP, bhaiya. So I would technically be called a bhaiya. And dhaba is a restaurant, a street side, kind of next to the highway restaurant. So there was this restaurant that in the Shiva trilogy set 4,000 years ago. Lord Shiva and Nandi was supposed to go into a restaurant, and I named that restaurant Bhaiya Ka Dhaba. And my editor said, "Are you insane?" I said, "Look, I think it's a good joke." She said, "No, this cannot be."
So let's talk about something I raised with you before we went public, which is your idea of the Immortal Writers Centre. You always seem to have so many series, so many books in your head at any one time, and I heard you talk online about how you worry you won't be able to write them all. So you started this initiative. So could you just tell us a bit more about how it works and the whole concept, because it was new to me and it sounds very innovative.
Oh, thank you. Actually, it's new in India, but in the West it has been done. So there's an author called James Patterson, who's among the most successful authors there are, who writes in this Writers Centre. Wilbur Smith as well. How many of you guys have read River God or Wilbur Smith? This is one of the first. I read more non-fiction, but Wilbur Smith as a fiction writer was among my more favorite ones. But his newer books are actually through this model where you get a co-writer. So I've started this Writer Centre because you're right, my biggest problem is I've been lucky to receive too many ideas in my mind, and my biggest fear is that I will die before I finish all these books, and I don't want to carry my stories to my cremation pyre. So the idea was to get writers, and I make the kind of story summary, a 5,000, 10,000 word summary. I'm a bit of a control freak, so I give the full story summary, and then I tell them what the research material is, what all they should read. Then the writer kind of expands that into a 80,000, 100,000 word book, and then I work on it. So what this does is kind of expands my capacity, and there are a few books that have already been released in this way. Legend of Suhail Dev, some non-fiction books with my sister as well. Another fiction book is coming out, and yes, it's and of course, and I pay them upfront on this. It helps me to kind of expand my capacity. The core books only I will write, the Shiva Trilogy, Ramchandra, the things which are close to my heart. But these, start through this Writer Centre.
Very interesting. I know you yourself are a voracious reader, and you just said you're more into non-fiction, but I understand you read 5 to 6 books a month on average. And you've also been described in the video as the Indian Paulo Coelho. We've talked about Kautilya or Janaka, and so yeah, just what writers and what books inspire you or influence you?
I read too much to give kind of like a favorite of all time. So normally how I answer this book is of the books I've read in the recent past, which ones have I found very interesting. I'm reading the books of this scholar called Niall Ferguson. How many of you guys have read Niall Ferguson? He's a historian, scholar.
I've heard of his name, but never.
Oh God, seriously, no? Oh.
I have.
Listen, you guys must read him. He's
not a fan myself.
Yeah, and Niall Ferguson is. There are things, and I've said this also. There are things which I obviously will not agree with him on. He, for example, he defends the British Raj. He thought it was good. It was good for the UK, not so good for the Indians or for others. But the way I see it, I've always said this: you actually should try to read the books and works of those you disagree with. That's the only way to grow. Because if you are reading only those you agree with all the time, you're stuck in an echo chamber. And particularly if you can find those who you disagree with but are actually scholars, because then you hear the best point of view, of another side, the most well thought through, the most well researched. Niall Ferguson is a brilliant scholar. There's no doubt about it. So I've read many books of his in the recent past, and the one I'm reading right now is this book called Doom. This was written while the COVID pandemic was still on, and it's a very insightful book on how disasters have happened in human history and what are the learnings from that. And through that he explores how we have handled the COVID pandemic. Extremely insightful. Fantastic book. I'd strongly recommend it. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think I've hogged Amish long enough, so I might have to put my dark glasses on, but I would like to open it up for your questions. And I have more if you flag at all, but I'm sure we've got a lot of questions for Amish.
Yeah. Hi, there's one here. Okay.
Yes, just here.
Yeah.
The mic is just on its way.
Just on its way. To you. Because I think that we'll go to the fine people hearing online as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my
Sorry,
question
could you introduce
is,
yourself for you?
It's split into parts. So
No, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I did not hear that. My name is Aryan.
Aryan, okay.
Hi. First of all, big fan.
Thank you.
Absolutely star-struck right now. So first of all, could you please tell me about your time at the Nehru Center? Because I'm very much interested in, is there some sort of outreach program or something run by the government where people like me, I've just recently done my master's, so I need to contribute in some sense. And the second bit is that after this, can I get 30 seconds with you and a picture for my mom?
Done. You get. So the second part first, do a video call with your mom, and I will of course seek her blessings.
Thank you very much.
On the Nehru Center is, you've heard of the British Council, right?
Yeah.
So the Nehru Center is the Indian equivalent of the British Council. We have such cultural centers across the world, but the one in London is our biggest anywhere in the world. We have our own building in Mayfair, lovely Edwardian building. We have an auditorium, art gallery. So all of you, whenever you come to London, you must drop in. It's on South Audley Street in Mayfair, the heart of central London. And we have an internship program as well. So many London students actually join us, and for short internship programs. So, if you guys want to get involved, do write in to us. Our email IDs are there on our website, nehrucenter.org.uk.
Right.
And among the key things, and I'm not a bureaucrat, obviously, right? Normally, the director of the Nehru Center was always a foreign service officer, a bureaucrat. I'm part of an experiment that the Indian government wanted to do to get some private sector guys into the government at relatively senior joint secretary ranks It's a small number, just some 10-15 of us. The idea being, that maybe we'll come in with some fresh ideas, fresh blood. We are not looking to make a life out here, so so we can break a few eggs, try new things. That was the idea. So it's an innovative idea.
Yeah.
So I'm here as a part of that experiment, as Director Nehru Center, Minister Culture and Education at the High Commission. And part of what we've tried to do at the Nehru Center is actually make it much more multicultural. So Nehru Center had become, for the want of a better term, a bit like a ghetto, and Indians talk to Indians basically, out there. And we wanted to expand that, have more, non-Indians on stage, non-Indians in the audience. Of course, the theme has to be Indian. It has to be some Indian connect. But I think in a very significant measure, we've managed to achieve that. And a big part of those who helped us do this are actually our interns, because they're students. They come in with fresh ideas, fresh energy. So do write into us. We'd be very happy to explore.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Arun. Yeah. Whoever you decide.
Hello, Amish sir.
And there's a mic back there as well for anyone who wants to draw attention. Sorry, what is your name?
My name?
Yeah?
I'm Evie.
Sorry?
Evie.
Evie. And you are?
Tom.
Tom. So Evie and Tom are the two most powerful guys in the room. Whoever grabs their attention gets the mic. Alright. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In one of your talks, you talked about when you write, it should follow your soul's purpose, or it should flow rather than trying to control it with what will work in the market. And I found it really beautiful. My question to you is, with the massive popularity that you have received, did you find it difficult to detach yourself from it and still follow your purpose, or how was your experience with the popularity?
Good question. Yeah, because if I think the key problem is if you start seeing any artist start seeing art as a way to make money, and I always say this: if the purpose is to make money, there are other equally easy routes, right? So banking, for example, right? It's not a very popular profession, but it's a legal profession to make good money, right? Art always has to be the voice of your soul. At least that's the way I see it, right? So till today, I write the way it comes to me, and I become practical and pragmatic when I'm marketing the book, because at that time, I have to worry about the publisher has invested so much money. I have to make sure the publisher recovers and makes a good profit. But while writing, even till today, I don't care about anyone when I'm writing. I write what feels right to me. It's also because actually the way the process is, when I write, and I've said this earlier often, it actually is like there's a parallel universe, and I get to enter that universe and record what I see. I see the characters, I see the world, I hear them, I hear their thoughts, I feel their emotions, and I record what I see, which is why I love writing so much. It truly is like a spiritual experience. And if I mess that up because, if I write a scene this way, this critic will write it, then I'm messing up that universe, right? And even now I still can't understand why that universe opens up to me. Because I was never creative when I was young. I always read a lot, yes, but I was as left-brained as they come. I was very academically oriented, graduated in mathematics. You can't get more left-brained than that. I did an MBA. I was active in sports, boxing, gymnastics, cross-country running, etc. But I was never creative. So it started only with my first book, Immortals of Melua. Before that, I'd written no fiction. So somewhere in the back of my mind, I know it might sound strange, but that thought is also there, that if I start disrespecting that universe, the blessing will stop. Because it's not that I quote unquote create it. I still have no idea how it comes to me. So if I screw around with it, it will stop. So for me, it's very critical that I should follow it the way it is. If the book doesn't work, no problem. I'll write the way it comes to me. Luckily till now I haven't had to make that difficult choice. The books keep working, but I'll truly be tested if a book flops, I guess. But I'm very clear, I'm going to keep writing the way it comes to me.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Neha.
Hi,
yeah, so basically I've read almost all your books and I really like the way you contemporize mythology. So we can, as youth, we relate to it quite well. And so just basic question, I mean, why, when and at what age, how did you get so much interested in mythology and, you know?
Okay, good question. Just good fortune of birth here. My grandfather was a Pandit at the Vishwanath temple in Kashi, and he used to teach at Banaras Hindu University. He used to teach maths and physics, hence the obsession in our family with mathematics. And our family just had that atmosphere, I guess. And so my grandfather on my father's side, and my grandmother on my mother's side was also a teacher. She was a principal of her college. So there was always an atmosphere in our family of reading a lot, debating, discussing our culture, and you know, my grandfather used to say, so did my grandmother on my mother's side. She used to say this, that if you actually read the ancient Indian scriptures, they are deeply liberal. So the more you read, the more, you know, more deeply liberal you will become, more intuitively liberal you will become. And so there was no, there was never a concept of, you know, blasphemy. You know, Vedic Sanskrit doesn't have a translation for the word blasphemy. You guys know that? Vedic Sanskrit, which is the language of our ancestors, there is no translation for the English word blasphemy. There is no translation for the English word evil. There is no translation for the English word potato. Right? Yeah, there's a reason for these things. If you don't have something in your culture, you don't have a word for it. Right? Potatoes weren't there in ancient India, so they didn't have a word for it in Vedic Sanskrit. Similarly, blasphemy as a concept didn't exist, so they didn't have a word for it. And if you actually just practice this, if you actually question and understand things, it remains in your mind no matter what. If you're just trying to just mug it up, it doesn't remain, you know, without understanding. But if you question, debate, and then it enters your mind, it remains. And that was the atmosphere in our family. We'd discuss many of these stories, philosophies, and we'd debate, we'd think about it, because that's the atmosphere that was built up, you know, by, so just good fortune of birth here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's one at the back, I saw, yeah.
Hello, sir. I'm Shreya.
Hi, Shreya.
And like you just talked about liberation, you know, and then I think Indian history talks a lot about the topics that we hear very often from the West about patriarchy or maybe women rights or LGBTQ. How do you think like the youth should balance out between the idea of West and the cultural idea that we have already had for all these years? I mean, it's not just about the LGBTQ or women rights, but then I think the idea of the West is very different from what we have already like had in our history. So how do you think we can balance it out?
There are some things which I think are very inspiring in ancient Indian culture, and I'm a very proud Indian. I never deny that. I wear it on my sleeve. But there are good things to be learned from all cultures. The West has been the most successful culture of the last few centuries, particularly from the 17th century onwards. So there's a lot that we can learn from them, no doubt about it. But there are some things which, at least in my opinion, are perhaps better expressed in our culture, in the Indian culture. So you can respect the rights of particular groups without feeling the need to hate someone else. Often I find that modern Western discourse, that kind of comes in naturally. Right? So for example, if we speak of women's rights, okay, which is our most ancient scripture in India? Rig Veda, yeah, goes back minimum at least 4,000, 5,000 years, probably a lot earlier, right? Maybe 7,000, 8,000 years ago. The Rig Veda is hymns written by? Okay, smart man. The Rig Veda is hymns written by men rishis, the equivalent of prophets and messiahs, Also women rishis, rishikas, right? Like Gargi, like Maitreyi, like Indrani. We had the equivalent of women prophets and messiahs in ancient India, right? Their status was even higher than those of kings. I've said this line often in India, that there are idiots in modern India who say women shouldn't read scriptures at certain times of month. And we should tell them, you idiots, women wrote the scriptures a few thousand years ago. We had women who founded universities in ancient India, like Vallabhi University. We had women who ruled in their own name in ancient India, not as the wife of the king or the daughter of a king, in their own name. Okay, like Prabhavati Gupta, for example. We had women who led their armies into battle, like Rudrama Devi. This was a part of our ancient way, but didn't necessarily mean that you have to hate men. Right? You can actually have both. Just like loving my God doesn't mean I have to hate other gods or call them false gods. No. My God for me, your God or goddess for you. Right? The same with LGBTs. How many have heard of, I'm assuming everyone has heard of Lord Krishna? Yes. Yeah? Who was the Lord Krishna was a Chandravanshi, everyone knows that? The Chandravanshis were the line of, the dynasty of which Lord Krishna was a part. Who was the founder of that dynasty? Does anyone know?
He was a transgender.
My God, you are impressive. Applause to you. The founder of Lord Krishna's dynasty, and Lord Krishna is worshipped as a god. The founder of his dynasty was a transgender, okay, called Ila. She founded the dynasty as a woman. She later became a man. She founded it as a woman, right? Which is why one of the names of Lord Krishna is Aila, descendant of Ila. So this was a part of the ancient Indian way, but there was no need to respect, just because you respect the rights of transgenders doesn't mean you have to hate women, right? This entire thing of that to love something, you have to hate the opposite. This to me is a slightly worrying concept that tends to come from the modern West. Perhaps this we should not learn in India. We should try and revive our ancient Indian way.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Whoever can draw their attention. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Vaishnavi, and I just wanted to sort of build up on what we were talking about LGBTQ groups in India and the whole same-sex marriage debate that's going on in the Supreme Court. So, as somebody who has a lot of influence and sway with the politicians in India and a lot of influential people in India, would you push for more education about queer people, more education about how lots of people nowadays, especially because of the same-sex marriage hearings in the Supreme Court, a lot of youth nowadays believe that it's a very Western thing that we have, we're debating, but Indian history and Indian mythology especially has so much to say about how queer people coexisted and how all people of all genders, religions coexisted very peacefully in India, which is not so much the case today. So would you push for more education on those topics? Would you push for any sort of sexual education and things like that in Indian education, which it severely lacks?
Yeah, in fact I've written of this publicly in articles, but let me answer this in a nuanced way. So for example, there's this line which I've quoted a few times, Purush Napunsak Nari, sorry, it is a Navadi thing, Purush Napunsak Nari, I will translate, don't worry. Purush Napunsak Nari, va jiva charachara koi, sarva bhav bhaja kapata taji, mohi param priya soi. Translates as any man, any woman, any transgender, any living being, any plant, any animal. You give up deceit, love each other, come to me, you're my people. Who said this? Lord Krishna? No. Who said this? Any guesses? It is one of our gods, by the way. Guess who said this? And think of how inclusive it is. Any man, any woman, any transgender, any plant, any living being, any animal, love each other, give up deceit, come to me, you're my people. No? You're getting warm, yeah? Lord Ram, applause for her. Lord Ram. Now this is there in the Ramcharitmanas. Now imagine if you speak of transgender rights to an Indian, not by quoting an American who an Indian would not connect with, but by quoting Lord Ram. And you tell him, be like Lord Ram. Will that have an impact? That's a point I made in my article. We should teach, fortunately we don't have to make stuff up, it's all there in our ancient scriptures. All we have to do is teach them, right? But a modern education system in India is tries to do everything except teach Indian stuff, right? So even like the number of seasons that those of you who studied in India, what were you taught? How many seasons are there in India?
3 seasons.
Okay, but what are you taught in your school? 4, right? Summer, autumn, winter, spring, right? And in the second standard, I had asked my teacher, ma'am, where's monsoon? Right? Monsoon is the main season, yeah, in India. India actually has 6 seasons. Europe has 4 seasons. Something as basic as this Indian education system is westernized and Europeanized. We need to Indianize our stuff. But having said that, that's why I calibrate this a bit. There are some things which at least I believe, even when you're teaching gender, should you be teaching, for the want of a better term, sexualized stuff to children? No. In my mind, there are lines that you draw. There are some things you learn only when you become an adult. You must teach them about, about reproduction, but there are lines that you don't cross. For me, in that sense, so teach them genders, teach them, it's all there in our scriptures, but there's an age to learn various things. So that's why it's a nuanced answer. So in some ways, much more liberal than what's there in the West, but in some ways, conservative compared to what the West is teaching. Yeah? Okay.
I think we've got time for just one more question. So, again, whoever
has the mic.
Yeah, whoever has
that
the
one there. Yes, hi. Yeah.
Hi, Amish sir. My name is Rohit.
Hi, Rohit.
I just wanted to preface this by saying I came into the talk like 10 minutes late. I don't know whether you discussed this earlier, but I've always been curious because, especially thinking about how you're writing in an Indian context, right? The characters that you use within your stories, the mythological characters that you use in your stories, they're not just characters, but they are very personal, very sensitive to people's, imaginations, beliefs. They're being worshipped on the daily, and that sort of thing. So my question is, as an author, you state that you value art above everything else. But what's that sort of relationship been between managing art and people's very strong beliefs, especially to someone whose books are as widely read as yours?
Okay. I should say I've never said my art is above everything else. One of the things I always believe is what is always at the top is dharma. For those who don't know, it's an Indian word, dharma. It's often erroneously translated as religion. It's actually not religion.
It's a way of life.
Yeah. Dharma, panth actually translates as religion. Dharma is a concept through which various religions have emerged. And the root of the word dharma is a concept is a dhatu, is a root called dhru, which means that which binds, that which balances, that which sustains. And adharma, or the opposite of dharma, is that which unbalances, that which causes dissonance. Right? And I think that everything that you do, if it's driven by dharma, you will, at least in some small measure, have a positive impact. So, if my approach to my art is, I don't care if it causes dissonance, I'll be true to my art, then I don't know if that's the right thing. This is my opinion. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. In my books, for example, I speak on the caste system. I'm very strongly against the caste system. I don't use my surname because my surname is a caste surname. I don't use my surname on the cover of my books. I speak of women's rights. In a particular book of mine, I have 2 gay characters. Both of them are warriors. They just happen to love each other, right? And I don't kind of make a caricature of them, as regrettably happens in some Bollywood movies. You know, they are warriors. They just happen to love each other. That's all, right? I speak on the Hindu-Muslim issue through my book Legend of Suhail. So I've spoken on subjects which you could say are sensitive, right? I've been in writing for 12 years. You can Google me. Will you find any controversy around me? You won't, because actually there's never been any controversy around my books. And why do you think that is? Because actually what drives me is not the art. What drives me is dharma. That if I'm speaking on the Hindu-Muslim issue, if I'm going to cause dissonance, then that will cause controversy. But if I speak honestly but try and drive unity, it will not cause controversy. If I speak against the caste system, but while doing that, preach hatred against any caste, whether they are forward caste or backward caste, then that will cause controversy. But if I am talking on that while preaching balance, then it will not cause controversy. So what drives me is actually my art is it's not that everything else is in the service of my art. My art is in the service of dharma. That's how I write. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you, Amish, for a wonderful talk. And to you, the audience, for joining us this evening. If you've enjoyed today, please do visit us at york.ac.uk/events to find out more about upcoming things that are happening. And if you would like a copy of Amish's book, it's available to buy, as I say, from our independent bookseller, Fox Lane Books, at the drinks reception outside in the foyer. And Amish,
and a big shout out to Fox Lane Books. It's an indie bookseller. I just discovered them because they're really selling these books. It's good to have indie sellers. They're extremely important. So thank you, Fox Lane. And sorry, before you start, if I may thank, Rohit, Claire, York University, all you guys, thank you so much for organizing this, and all of you for turning up. Seriously, thank you so much.
So I'd just like to add my huge thanks to Claire and to Amish for an absolutely fascinating talk. I grew up in Ireland in the 1970s, so I love the idea that there is no Sanskrit word for blasphemy. I'm slightly more worried about the potato. But I wanted to pick up on the theme of knowledge because, as some of you will know, this is a university who was founded in 1963 with the motto of "on the threshold of knowledge." And so I really felt it was hugely appropriate in our 60th anniversary year for Amish to start off his reflections talking about the value of knowledge, but also the idea of multiple truths. We are a university that passionately believe in using our ability to bring people from all over the world, from all over our region, from all over our country together to explore what they don't know about. And I found tonight really fascinating because I'll be honest and say I haven't read any of Amish's books yet, but I'm completely fascinated. And so thank you again so much. And thank you to Claire. Our academics are incredibly busy at all times, and it's always a huge privilege for us when we volunteer them into doing things they didn't know they wanted to do. Although I will say in this case, Claire took about 35 seconds to email back to say yes, please. But thank you again, Amish. It has been such a pleasure to welcome you to York. It's been a pleasure to meet your family as well. And thank you all. Please buy lots of books and come and have a drink and talk to Amish a bit more. Thank you.
Thanks.